I have the distinct pleasure this evening of introducing Echad Mi'yididai, Rabbi Yaacov Haber Shlita. Before I do that, I would just like to make one or two comments with reference to what I consider to be an outstanding, and I'm not even worthy of commenting on such a massive undertaking that Avinoam did, Nefesh HaChaim. I noticed in Rav Shechter's approbation, he calls him an Avrech, which I got a kick out of. The term Avrech generally is associated with people who are students in Kollel, and Avinoam became a student in the Kollel of his own making, if you will, autodidactic, and it's amazing the amount of effort that he put into this work, and I am familiar with it because the last number of years, Baruch Hashem, I've had the great pleasure of speaking to him on an ongoing basis. I'm reminded of the Gemara in Hamafkid. The Gemara says, Adam rotzeh b'kav shalo yoter mitisha kabin shel chavero. And Rashi comments over there, Chavivin alav ayidei she'amel bahen. Because of the effort and the unbelievable energy that he invested into this work, monumental work. So Chazal tell us, and the Pasuk says, and Chazal mentioned this as well, Nefesh Omel Omlalo. So I really want to give Avinoam a tremendous mazel tov for the unbelievable effort that he put into this. And really he was Shemesh, great Talmidei Chachamim along the way, and that itself was also quite helpful in the course of his producing this, what I consider to be stupendous work. Rabbi Yaacov Haber Shlita, in my mind, is the model of a Rav par excellence. He's one of my models. Literally, he's been all over the world. I think I can take that in a literal sense. He was a Rav in Muncie, in Australia, in Buffalo. Baruch Hashem, Eretz Yisrael was Zocheh, now to have him as a Rav as well. He's a Talmud Muvlok of one of the Gdolei Ador, Rav Chaim Volozhin, and he's someone who also, the last number of years, well, over a decade, perhaps several decades, has produced outstanding curriculum material. He's a mechanic par excellence. We had the great zchus of having him teach in our yeshiva for a number of years, and what a loss it was, but a gain to the rabbinate, Rabbah Shemesh. He's a master teacher, and he's someone who I consider to be a force for stability, and one of my favorite topics, normalcy. One of the noble rabbanim left in the world. I don't see there are too many left. If you had Yudati, I can say that because of my age, you can get away with a lot of things. And to me, he's a model par excellence, and as I said, it's a great zchus and pleasure to have someone of his stature present, in the context of this evening's Sefer, Nefesh HaTzimtzum, Yedideinu, Rabbi Yaacov Haber.
Thank you very much, Rav David. That was very, very generous. And, it's a very big kavod to speak in your presence. And Rav Avinoam, before I say anything else, I want to share in the mazel tov that the Rav gave. It's just this book, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm a publisher, besides for other things, and I have an extensive Jewish English book library. This Nefesh HaTzimtzum may be the greatest contribution that I've seen to the Jewish English book library in the last 10, 15 years. I'm trying to think of what happened 10, 15 years ago, maybe the Arts World Shots or something, but this is really something very, very special. And I'm not going to speak long now because I know we have to finish at 9:30 and I don't want to take away from what Rav Avinoam has to say, but I do want to speak a little bit. I'll get straight to the controversial things. First of all, the Nefesh HaChaim, everyone knows, was written by Rav Chaim Volozhin, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh L'Vracha, Talmud Muvak of the Vilna Gaon. which is how he described himself as the Talmud Muvak of the Vilna Gaon. And he writes, or his son writes in his name, that he considered the Vilna Gaon to be something kimat like a malach, something of a different world. The Vilna Gaon, it's hard for us to even understand who he was and what he was and how one person can encompass so much. And Rav Chaim Volozhin was the Talmud Muvak, and of course, he was the founder of Volozhin Yeshiva, which is the mother of all yeshivas, which makes him the father of the yeshiva world. All yeshivas today, or at least in the more Litvische world, model themselves after Volozhin Yeshiva, or else they say they do. And even the non-Litvische world, the Hasidic yeshivas, the Sephardi yeshivas, very much have taken into consideration and changed their curriculum based on the Volozhin Yeshiva and the curriculum of Rav Chaim Volozhin. So Rav Chaim Volozhin really is, in that sense, the Avishai Yeshivas. And anybody who has gone to yeshiva or has benefited from yeshivas one way or the other should have a tremendous amount of haracha for Rav Chaim Volozhin. It's not just another book. The Nefesh HaTzimtzum is taking the Nefesh HaChaim, and just the footnotes alone represent an in-depth study of what should be considered the Torah Shebiksav, like the Bible of the yeshiva world, other than the Bible itself. But I mean, it should be considered. It was written by the Aviyah Yeshivos, and Rav Chaim Volozhin's dying wish, literally, or wishes, were just two things. One is, I want this book printed, Nefesh HaChaim, and at the expense, or he wasn't that concerned about all of his wonderful, wonderful Divrei Torah and his Kedushim on the Sugyas that he has, and his Shilos and Shuvas, which are so important. Don't worry about that, he writes. His son writes. His son says, Rabitzla says, he told me to print the Nefesh HaChaim and to keep Volozhin Yeshiva going. So those were his two dying wishes. So the Nefesh HaChaim should be really what Rav Chaim Volozhin considered to be his contribution to the world, and particularly to the world of yeshivas, which of course is so important. That being said, it's a pella to me, actually, and I teach the Nefesh HaChaim. Actually, we teach the Nefesh HaChaim in my Beit Knesset twice a week to a very chashuv crowd of people. But this is my third time teaching the Nefesh HaChaim cover to cover. It's a pella to me that the Sefer is not held in the esteem that it should be held in the yeshivas. I think it's read like quickly. The hard parts and the hard words are just skipped over. In fact, when I learned Nefesh HaChaim the first time, it told me skip Shar Gimel. Okay, well, that's 1/4 of the book. But that wasn't it. And all the Hagos, skip those too. It's basically reduced it to the book that it isn't, an unimportant really book. I mean, there's always nice things, but if Rav Chaim Volozhin wrote the whole thing and he insisted that it be printed, it would seem to me, and I think it does seem to you, that the whole book should be read and learned and reviewed. And what Avinoam did was very special, because he actually, in this translation, which I believe is the only complete translation of the Nefesh HaChaim, and therefore I say it's historic, actually analyzed every word and footnoted every word, every source, where the word comes from, why did he use this word and not use another word. Just a wonderful, wonderful work, and Aniyah Shakoach to you. And hopefully, what you did will get rid of this idea, or this Yetzer Hara, to skip the hard parts. Not, by the way, that you made it any easier. As a matter of fact, a number of parts that I thought I didn't skip, I found out that I did skip when I looked at what you had to say about it. It made me consider and reconsider so many, even words that I just took for granted. Why is he using this word, not that word? And all the different cross-references that are there. That's volume 1. Volume 2 is, in its own right, chashuv. I mean, here there's the historic machlokas, or we could even call it the milchama, Milchemes HaTzimtzum, which I'm sure Avinoam will speak about. This is what people say was the machlokas between the Vilna Gaon and the Hasidim, and so many stories and so many problems and so much division in Klal Yisrael. And very few people in the last 100 years, I think, has actually taken the subject on. Either you're pro or con, or like most people just have no idea what the whole subject is all about. Avinoam takes it on, writes a big, thick volume, the whole volume too, and insists, I believe correctly, so I think I agree, that the whole book is, the whole Nefesh HaChaim is really about Tzimtzum. It's not something, not just a piece of it or a part of it. The whole thing is about Tzimtzum, as is, we have something else in common at one time, am I allowed to say? At one time we both learned in Chabad. Do people know that about you? They don't know it about me? It's part of my, in high school I went to Chabad, and at that time, like in other yeshivas, they have Mishnayos Baal Peh, but we have Tanya Baal Peh, and at that time I did learn the whole Tanya Baal Peh. As a matter of fact, if I may boast for a moment, I once went to a Yechidus with the Rebbe Zatzel, and he asked me, do I learn Tanya Baal Peh? And I said, I do. And he said, so how much did you learn? I said, the whole thing. He said, the whole thing? So I said, yeah. They called, and I tried to call my bluff, and he said, okay, let me hear it. So I said, the whole thing? He said, you said the whole thing. Was that good? And I began to say, Tanya, I said Tanya Baal Peh in his office until chapter 26, the end of Chavav. And then the secretary stopped me, and I still have today the silver dollar that he gave me. It was a lot of work for $1. But it did give me the background to open Nefesh HaChaim and understand the concepts and understand the words, because they really are the same concepts, and if they agree or disagree is not even the subject, my subject anyways, but the point was that it's a whole part of Yiddishkeit which needs to be addressed. I want to speak about one very specific thing and a short thing. The Hakdama of the Nefesh HaChaim is written, as I said, by his son, Rabbi Yaacov ben Chaim Volozhin. This Hakdama is another one of the things that everybody skips. I've never learned it until this time around. I never actually went through the Hakdama, and if you look at the Svarim that have commented on the Nefesh HaChaim, very seldom is there any comment at all on the Hakdama. So you and I were first on this, commenting on the Hakdama of the Nefesh HaChaim. And in that Hakdama, he learns his father's life like he would be learning a difficult sugya of Shatz. He takes his life, he takes every one of his hanhagas, every one of the emphasis of his life, and he analyzes it and explains it in a way that we gave in our shiur, I believe 7 shiurim, is that right? 7 shiurim just on the Hakdama of Rabbi Yitzchak's Hakdama and Nefesh HaChaim. If I had to put it into 1 or 2 sentences in analyzing his father's life, what his comment is that his father, Rav Chaim Volozhin, was the paragon of humility. He was an Anav Mikol Adam, like Moshe Rabbeinu. Rav Chaim Volozhin, I mean, you would think about it as the father of the yeshiva world, that he'd be like a sort of a yeshiva shagat. Not that he wasn't, or not that he wasn't any type of a yeshiva shalamdan, but he speaks about his humility. He speaks about how he would run from wherever he was to make sure that he was in shul. And I know he didn't daven in shul because he davened at Tzacham and the shul davened later. He would run to shul to make sure he could learn over a little bit of parsha with the Balabata. He writes this in the Hakdama. He would say a little Dvar Halacha, which was not, you didn't need Rav Chaim Volozhin to do a little Dvar Halacha, but he did that, and he felt that was an extremely important thing to do. Every Jew that came in front of him, according to the Hakdama, was extremely important. He was a humble man. He was full of humility. We also know of the not so much from the Hakdama, but we also know of the heart of Rav Chaim Volozhin. I just translated and printed out here. It's a sentence from one of the Shiloh and Shuvas. There's very few Shiloh and Shuvas of Rav Chaim Volozhin. because he didn't insist that they be printed. But there is a sefer called Chotam Shulush that has challenges of Rav Chaim Volozhin, and he writes, this is an exact translation, I believe. It says, regarding the case of the Aguna of Vilna, I see, he says to the person who's writing him a letter, he was corresponding with one of the Gedolei Hador. He says, I see you are leaning towards stringency. You feel, Rav Chaim Volozhin says to this Gadol, you feel the woman should not remarry. Says Rav Chaim Volozhin, and this is part of an 8-page shuvah of Shas and Poskim. But he says, the reason you are leaning this way is because you are not here. You do not hear the crying of this woman, nor do you see her tears. If I would be where you are, I too would be stringent, but I am here. And therefore, I will rule leniently for her. May Hashem save me from mistakes. So says Rav Chaim Volozhin. And there's so much to learn just in those few words about how halacha works and how psak works and what it means to be a rav and what it means to care about another person and how somebody's tears can actually affect my psak halacha. It's mavel al arayim to start learning what he meant by this. But I just want to say one simple thing, and that is, like, look at this man's heart. This was not a cold genius. This was a person with a heart and a person with humility. And I would say the very last thing or the farthest thing in the world from being an elitist in any way. So here's my kasha. The question is, most yeshivas in the yeshiva world are somehow or another, if not entirely, modeling themselves, as I said, after the Volozhin yeshiva. The Volozhin yeshiva was the yeshiva, and everyone's making a Volozhin. So whether you're talking about Slobodka, whether you're talking about Brisk, whether you're talking about the whole Brisker dynasty is a Volozhin dynasty, comes from their great-grandparents, the great-grandfather, the Beis Halevi. Whether you're talking about Beis Medrash Kavo of Lakewood, Rav Aaron Kudler said many times, Ich machal Volozhin in America. That was his language. I want to make a Volozhin in America. It's actually on a tape where he speaks about college and also he says, Ich machal Volozhin in America. Rav Chaim Volozhin was so non-elitist, and yet it seems that the yeshivas that came out of them, the truer, the more so, are very elitist. Very hard to get into these yeshivas. I remember I once flew to Eretz Yisrael to my son wanted to learn in Rav Yeshua's Brisk, Rav Yeshua's Elevations Yeshiva Brisk. So I had learned in Brisk also by his father. So I thought maybe I had some protexia. So I got him to speak to him, and I wanted to introduce my son. And I, he was pushing him away and come back and don't come yet. So he said to me, Rabbi Yeshua said to me, he says, I'll tell you the truth. He said, I don't really know your son, but this is not shtick. I genuinely don't want him to come here. Okay, why not? Isn't this a yeshiva? Or you want to learn to let him go to another yeshiva. I don't want. So how does it happen? And this is something one little thing I want to explain. How does it happen that someone with the nature and the personality and the learning of Rav Chaim Volozhin, and we can also assume that was the derech of the Vilna Gaon. How can it happen that the yeshivas seem to be something different than that? Let me just tell you one quick story. It's stuck in my head. But years ago, I was the director of education of the OU, the Orthodox Union. And when I came to the OU, so I was a youngish person, but there was an older Rav, maybe I won't mention his name. It was an older Rav who was very chashuv a person, and he was the head of something, synagogue council or something. And he was there, so we became friends. I was 40, he was 65. So he said to me, he says, I'll tell you a story, he tells me this story. He says that when he went to high school, RJJ, and he went one time, he used to ride the subway back and forth. So on the subway, one time he met Rav Aaron Kudler. Rav Aaron Kudler also used to ride the subway. So he sees the Gadol Hador, Rav Aaron Kudler, he sits down next to him, Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? This is my name. In other words, he knew Rav Aaron's name. He asked him, what's his name? And they had this conversation, and he said, what are you doing now? He said, I'm graduating high school, and what are you going to do next year? By the way, I'm just telling you a story, that's all. So he said, I'm planning on going to a Yeshiva, Yeshiva University. So Rav Aaron said, don't do that. Don't do that, that's not where you should go. I have a yeshiva in Lakewood, and that's a very kosher yeshiva, and it's all Torah, and there's no distractions, and it's going on and on. He says, yeah, but my parents want me to get a college degree, and they're going back and forth. A 17-year-old yeshiva bacher with Rav Aaron Kutler, right? Just going back and forth on the subway. So anyways, finally, Rav Aaron convinced him. And he went home, and he told his parents, I want to go to Lakewood Yeshiva. So the parents said, well, you can't go to Lakewood Yeshiva, you have to go to Yeshiva University, you have to get a college education, degree, you have to become. So he said, for 3 days, he tells me, he's arguing with his parents that he wants to go to Lakewood Yeshiva. He met Rav Aaron, he's Ashkacha Pratis, he met Rav Aaron Kutler on the subway and all that. And finally, his parents said, okay, do whatever you want to do. So he was very happy with the outcome, and he got on a bus. He told me it was a Trailways bus. He got on a bus and went to Lakewood, and he went with the Basura Tova that his parents gave in to him. So he went to Rav Aaron, and Rav Aaron said, you want to come to my yeshiva? So he said, yes, Baruch Hashem. He says, well, who do you think you are? He wouldn't take him in. You want to come to... So in the yeshiva world, they will say there's two dinim. It's like a din for the subway and a din for the base. Two dinim. So let me try. I just want to try to. This is a kasha with, I believe, a teretz, but the teretz I think has huge ramifications, and I'm just using this opportunity to say by teretz to this kasha. And the teretz is that, of course, Rav Chaim Volozhin was the humblest of all men, and of course he wouldn't deny Torah from any Jew, man, woman, child. And it had to be. His whole sefer is about Tzelem Elokim. The whole sefer is about the value and the importance of every single Jew and every single neshama and the nefesh and the ruach and the whole thing. There's no way that Rav Chaim Volozhin would deny Torah from anyone. But that wasn't the pshat in his yeshiva in Volozhin. The purpose of his yeshiva in Volozhin was to create, just like maybe like the Israeli army. So the Israeli army has an elite unit, let's say an elite unit of the Air Force, and certain people go to that. If you have the right IQ and the right physical build and the right coordination and all that, you can do that. And if you don't, then you join the army. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, but this is something which was very, very special, a way to create an institution. This was, I believe, his dream, to create an institution for the future Gedolei Hador, for him to create leadership for the next generation and to create Gaonim for the next generation. This has nothing to do with Torah. It has nothing to do with how much Torah should be taught to every single Jew, no matter what the situation was or where it was. It has nothing to do with him running to shul to say a little Dvar Halacha. This is Volozhin. And it's very clear to me that when Rav Aaron Kutler said, Ich mache Volozhin in America, that's what he meant. Of course, there should be Torah for everybody. That's already a takana from the time of the Gemara. That's already comes through Shul ben Gamliel. Everybody has to go to Cheder. But that's not what the Rav Chaim Volozhin meant in this particular project of starting Volozhin or Yeshiva. And all the yeshivas that are modeled after them, I believe, are right, or at least true to their namesake or to their claim, that they want to create something. There should be some elite forces, but it's not necessarily for everyone. It's not necessarily for everyone. This is a kasha to teretz with huge ramifications, because what's happened over the years is that it's become clear, and I'm not suggesting otherwise, I'm just being a sociologist here for a moment, but it's become clear in everybody's mind that what should be for the elite troops is really for everyone. And if you, not only that, but if you don't make it there, then there's something wrong with you, and we have to send you out for special education or something. And the truth is that that's the special education. That's not the masses. I don't think that anybody in Europe, what do you have, 40, 50 people in Volozhin Yeshiva, I don't know the history, but 40, 50 people out of thousands of people that would learn every day and every morning and every night and be Baki B'Shas, and for sure. But this was something very, very special, and it just leads me to, the Kasha Terrace leads me to think how things have evolved and what have we done by creating something which is made for a certain amount of people and saying that if you don't go there, or something is wrong, then sorry, you can't get married. Or worse. So this is just a ha'ara that I wanted to make. There's so many deep things to say about the Nefesh HaChaim, about Rav Chaim Volozhin himself. But let's say the schus ha'yagin aleinu. I want to give Avinoam a bracha. That the schus of bringing this work to light, mamish la'or, motzi la'or, something which is reviving, something which is so emes, Torah's emes, not to mention solving historical machlokas, addressing historical machlokas. This should be a schus for you, for your family. It should be a schus for everyone who's around you. And ashrecha, and we're waiting for the next volume.
Amen, amen. Thank you so much. Those exceptionally kind words. Thank you all so very much for coming. Tonight I'm going to break with accepted practice. Chazal tell us there's a protocol when giving a presentation, and that protocol is postim b'chvod ha'achsanya. We start off by paying homage to our host. Tonight, I'm going to start off paying homage to the host, and I'm going to continue, and my entire talk is about paying homage to the host. We learn in the Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah, the 13 principles of faith, principle number 3. We talk about the Creator. Who the Creator has Eino Guf V'lo Yasigegu Masigei Haguf. Our Creator is not physical. Nothing physical affects Him. He's not affected by the creation of the world, unchanged as a result of the creation of the world. Atahu ad shelo nivra ha'olam, atahu misha nivra ha'olam, says the Alkot. God hasn't changed. If He hasn't changed, therefore He is everywhere. So when I'm paying homage to the host this evening, I'm paying homage to our achsanya, to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to God who is everywhere. And I would venture to suggest that if I wanted to summarize Sefer Nefesh HaChaim in one line, and Sefer Nefesh HaTzimtzum, it is about paying homage to our host and being aware of the presence of our host. That's what Nefesh HaChaim is all about. And by the end of this evening, please God, I hope that we can all leave here with a deeper understanding of what it means that we are in the environment of our host. So in that vein, I want to express a tremendous hakaras hatov. I am acknowledging and incredibly grateful to the Rebbeinu Shalom for having given me an opportunity. He's schlepped me through this project. When I first started this project 5 years ago, the Nefesh HaTzimtzum project started 5 years ago. Started as humble outlines. And I got to the end of the outlines, and it turned into a translation of Nefesh HaChaim, turned into a translation of all the additional commentaries and and writings of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin and his students, and then it ended up dealing with this controversial topic of the apparent machlokas about the concept of tzimtzum, and it was thought to have been that this machlokas, this concept of tzimtzum underpinned the difference between the Hasidim and the Misnadim in their view of the world. And it turns out there was no such machlokas about the Ikrei Emunah. It was all a complete misunderstanding. There was a terrible machlokas, but it wasn't about the Ikrei Emunah. And everyone misunderstood it. And I have to say, Hakar Tov Ta'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when I say Modim Anachnu Lach, I say so with full acknowledgement and full gratitude. Thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I also have to say a few more thank yous here this evening. Our local Achsanya, Rabbi David. I have to tell you something about Rabbi David. Nefesh HaTzimtzum project started 5 years ago. And as I mentioned, it started by writing up little notes. My little scribblings. And I had created a little wodge of notes, ever so small. And I thought, I'm a product manager, I work in the high-tech industry. And as a product manager, I've always got to test ideas. So I thought, who can I zing with this little wodge of notes? And I accosted Rabbi David one evening in the middle of the street. I don't know what I was thinking. I just ran up to him and, here, Rabbi David, here's some notes. I have to tell you how he received them. He took them from me. And he took them from me like they were the crown jewels. And he said, thank you. And he said, I will look at them. And he did. Rabbi David, do you have any idea what that did for me? You sent me back into my little hole, and I continued. And those little notes turned into Nefesh HaTzimtzum. Thank you. Thank you so much. May your support of Torah Shalom Nishma, as it was certainly true in my case, be ongoing. You are true students of Nefesh HaChaim, and you support Torah Shalom Nishma. And may you have many, many years to come of supporting Torah Gam Shalom Nishma V'Gam Shalom Nishma. Thank you. Among this little journey for the last 5 years, I encountered many, many special individuals and had a tremendous privilege to be put into contact with people across the globe, but also people locally. And one of those individuals was Rabbi Yaacov Haber. Even if it was only very brief, everyone I interacted with ended up raising questions, and I had to think about those questions. I didn't have answers. And eventually, the answers, I hope, were correctly presented in the form of interesting footnotes. And Rabbi Haber, even though we met relatively briefly during the 5-year writing process, nevertheless, in our brief conversations, you definitely inspired me to add some very interesting material to the Sefer. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for being here this evening, and thank you for your warm and exceptionally kind words. On the subject of thank yous, I have to point out another individual who's sitting here, and that is Rabbi Umari, Rav Chaim Volozhin, at whose feet I sat in a working man's kollel for 5 years, 2 of which overlapped with this project. And I cannot tell you, and I say this in front of everybody, Rav Chaim, I cannot tell you how much you have given me and how much of your Torah has spilled over into the Nefesh HaChaim. You've given me tools to be able to learn, and I am so grateful to you. And I wish you that thank you so much. On the subject of thank yous, I also want to thank the local BMTL committee for making this evening a possibility. Yeshiva. And I have one final thank you for my wife Tanya over there. And she is a remarkable lady who, after Rabbi David sent me back into my hole 5 years ago, and I only came out relatively infrequently, generally just to zing Rabbi David with the next tranche of whatever I've written. And Tanya, you've put up with everything, and thank you so much. There has to be a little irony that I am known to my friends as the Baal HaTanya, and that the Baal HaTanya should write a translation and a commentary on Nefesh HaChaim. Although I started this project 5 years ago, this project really started when I was a young teenager. I was brought up in an environment where the minute I would fall out of bed, I would say Moda'ani, I'd go to bed, about to fall deadbeat into bed, I would say Shema Yisrael. The entirety of the day would be punctuated with a conversation with God. Brachas before and after we eat, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. A Jewish life is a conversation with God. And I was a young teenager, and I was trying to figure out, God, when I'm looking at you guys, I see you, I don't see God. When I look around this room, I see the walls, I see the chairs, I don't see God. Who am I talking to? What am I talking to? And I'm sure every single person in this room, probably while you were teenagers, were grappling with the same questions, and maybe even today. And then I grew up a little bit more. A couple of years later, my father, when I was age 15, suddenly passed away. And if I was plagued by these questions before, I was plagued 10 times as much afterwards. And I don't know how I did it, but the Rebbeinu Shalom schlepped me through high school. I graduated high school. I ended up in Chabad, as Rabbi Haber mentioned. I was looking for something. I was looking for answers. A very long story later, I ended up in Keren B'Yavna. When I was in Keren B'Yavna, I was sitting one evening in the base medrash of Keren B'Yavna, contemplating the universe, looking up at the ceiling, and out of nowhere, an idea fell into my head. And with that idea, I realized that this person, my father, who was going to be the person who was going to answer all of my questions, who had been taken away from me, I realized that even if he would have lived, he would not have been able to answer these questions. And that was very difficult for me at the time. This idea is a simple idea, and I call it the limit of understanding. And it took me many years to learn how to articulate it. And there I was sitting age 19 in Keren B'Yavna. Little did I know that 30 years later, that little idea, the limit of understanding, would become the key to open up Nefesh HaChaim. So I want to share with you this evening this little idea, the limit of understanding. But before I do so, I want to tell you a little bit about Nefesh HaChaim. Nefesh HaChaim was written by Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, the primary student of the Vilna Gaon. Rav Chaim Volozhin was born in 1749 and he passed away. He was niftar in 1821. And on his deathbed, he gives his son the instruction, chish maher, the urgent instruction to publish Nefesh HaChaim, his magnum opus, which was indeed published in 1824. What is Nefesh HaChaim? Nefesh HaChaim is nothing less than a Shulchan Aruch of Hashkafa. It is a structured framework of how a Jew is meant to live his life. Nothing less than how a Jew is meant to live his life. It explains what a Jew is, how he is meant to interact with the world around him, and how he is meant to relate to God. How a Jew is meant to live his life. And this isn't just any Shulchan Aruch of Hashkafa. As Rabbi Haber just mentioned, being the student of the Vilna Gaon, the primary Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, Nefesh HaChaim represents the Vilna Gaon's outlook. In fact, I've peppered my translation of Nefesh HaChaim and Nefesh HaTzimtzum, I've peppered it with sources along the way from the Vilna Gaon's writings to demonstrate that the ideas in Nefesh HaChaim are sourced in the Vilna Gaon's perspective of the world. There are some people who say that he differed with his Rebbe's view. He didn't. He really did not. It's evident that he didn't. So that's the Nefesh HaChaim in a nutshell. But there's one little twist with the Nefesh HaChaim. Rav Chaim Volozhin wrote it in Kabbalistic language. The whole book, from beginning to the end, is presented as a Kabbalistic presentation. He doesn't breathe without quoting sources, right, left, and center. Zohar, Eitz Chaim, Pri Eitz Chaim, Kisvei Arizal, all over the place. And many others as well. So we have to ask a question. First of all, why did he write it? Second of all, how do we know the Kabbalah is authentic? It might sound like a strange question because obviously the Vilna Gaon thought that the Kabbalah was authentic. His writings are peppered with quotations from the Kabbalah. And of course Nefesh HaChaim is quoting from Kabbalah all over the place. But I want to ask the question, how do we know the Kabbalah is authentic? And not only does the Vilna Gaon think the Kabbalah is authentic, but as he comments in his commentary to Mishle, in two places, he states very clearly that we cannot understand the Torah, pshat in the Torah, without understanding Kabbalah. Very, very bold statement. Without Kabbalah, we cannot understand pshat in the Torah. How many people who are so well versed in Torah shebichsav, who don't know anything about Kabbalah, they think they know the pshat. According to the Vilna Gaon, they do not. How do we know this Kabbalah thing is authentic? So we have to ask the question, how do we know the Torah is authentic? Might sound like a strange question, but it's a very important question. Especially as we're coming up to Pesach. In 2 weeks' time, 95% of the Jews in Israel will be holding a Seder, at which they are going to be saying that I am the son or daughter of parents who are children of parents, and so on, all the way back to Ma'amad Har Sinai and all the way back to Yetzias Mitzrayim. The biggest proof, says the Sefer HaChinuch in his introduction, the very beginning of his introduction, the biggest proof to the authenticity of the Torah is that what we talk about happening to the Jewish people, it happened to all of us, it happened to our ancestors. We are the only religion in the world that has a claim that we had a mass revelation from God. If there was anything to be disputed in the Torah, there would have been contemporary literature at the time that would have disputed it. There's so many details in the Torah. Somebody would have said, oh, that didn't happen. No one made such a statement. And that is the biggest testament to the authenticity of the Torah. But the thing is, what was given as part of the Torah at Har Sinai, the Torah was actually given at three critical moments according to Gemara and Chagiga, Har Sinai, Ba'arvos Moav, and Ba'er Moed. But there's no question about it, the entire Torah was given over to all of the Jewish people while they were in the Midbar, between coming out of Egypt and going into Israel. Which parts of the Torah were given over? Three parts. The Torah Shebichsav, the written Torah, the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah, and the Halacha Moshe Sinai. So we know there is a Masorah, was handed down. The Torah was handed down from generation to generation, all the way down. That's not how it happened with the Kabbalah. On Har Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu also received the Kabbalah. But it wasn't handed down from generation to generation. It was handed down to unique individuals in each generation. And those individuals were not necessarily who we think are the Gedolei Adar. They for sure were the Gedolei Adar, but we may never have heard of them. So much so that the Abarbanel records in his commentary on Pirkei Avos called Nachalas Avos. At the end of chapter 3, he records there an account that the Rambam, Maimonides, only came into contact with Kabbalistic information towards the end of his life, and that he had apparently commented that had I been aware of this information when I was younger, I would have written things differently. Amazing comment. But the fact of the matter is the Kabbalah came through a single line of people through the generations. So the question still remains. We know that Torah is true because we have a Masorah through the entirety of the Jewish people. How do we know that Kabbalah is true? And the answer I would suggest is to be found in the introduction that Rav Chaim Volozhin writes to the Vilna Gaon's commentary on the Zohar, which of course is translated in Nefesh HaChaim. He makes a very simple statement. He says that if the Kabbalah is consistent with the rest of the Torah, then we can accept it as true. If there is any statement in the Kabbalah which suggests that we compromise any aspect of halacha, even a mitzvah, a minor mitzvah midrabanan, then we know with 100% certainty that it is bogus, it is not authentic. Why is this important? Because this very point is entirely critical to understand what was happening at the time when Nefesh HaChaim was written. Nefesh HaChaim was written at a point in time when there was an incredible fracture amongst the Jewish people between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim. What did the Hasidim do? They took the Kabbalah and they presented it in a way in which ordinary people could understand, which was fine. It was very noble, a very special thing that is done in Hasidic literature and by the Hasidic movement. And Kabbalah, what is Kabbalah essentially? Kabbalah is the knowledge of God, the deeper knowledge, the deeper understanding of the entirety of Torah. So people started learning Hasidus, and in effect they started learning Kabbalah, except something went wrong. People on the periphery of the Hasidic community, they started to take things out of context. They started thinking, oh, we need to get closer to God. And that's more important than everything else, because everything else they were thinking needs to bring us closer to God. So if I'm doing Torah mitzvahs, great, that brings me closer to God. But if I can really get into it, meditate, get into, clear my thoughts and attach them to the Rebbeinu Shalom, then it doesn't matter if I daven mincha bizman, on time. It's okay if I just delay it a little bit and daven mincha after nightfall. And once you enter into that, what's the difference between saying that and saying, the shul I want to go to is too far away from me on Shabbos, I'll just get in the car and go there, and it matters that I'm getting closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, what can I do? That's the ikar, the slippery slope. And that started happening. Comes along Rab Chaim Volozhin. What did he do in Nefesh HaChaim? There's one fundamental difference between Sefer Nefesh HaChaim and all the Sifrei Chasidus, of the contemporary Sifrei Chasidus of his time. The Toldos Yaakov Yosef, the Ma'orei Naim, the Degel Machane Ephraim, and of course Sefer HaTanya. They didn't quote their sources. They have some amazing Torah, amazing Kabbalah, but they didn't quote their sources. And the ground was right for anyone to pick up these Sfarim and think, wow, Hasidus, this is new, this is something different. A different path in Judaism. Comes along Nefesh HaChaim. What did he do? He took sentences from these Sifrei Chasidus, from these books of Chasidus. You could pick them up from the books of Chasidus, put them into Nefesh HaChaim, they're there. But with one difference. He doesn't breathe without quoting his sources. He'll bring an idea, and he, as it's written, here, you see it from the Zohar, you see it from the Pri Eitz Chaim, you see it from the Eitz Chaim, you see it from Shas, you see it from anywhere. He doesn't breathe without bringing his sources. What's his message? His message is that all of this Kabbalah, all of this Hasidus, it's all coming from the same Masorah. It's all coming from the same place. And therefore, there is no license to bend halacha in any way whatsoever, God forbid. That was the message, I believe, of Nefesh HaChaim. Unfortunately, the rift between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim got so bad that when Nefesh HaChaim was published, the Hasidim thought Nefesh HaChaim was talking about something else. They took this idea of Tzimtzum, and they said, that isn't our Tzimtzum, it's a different Tzimtzum. Therefore, the whole of Nefesh HaChaim doesn't apply to us. And for 200 years, it hasn't been understood that Nefesh HaChaim did apply to them. because what is now demonstrated in Nefesh HaChaim is that they misunderstood the idea of Tzimtzum as presented in Nefesh HaChaim. So I believe Nefesh HaChaim was written for that purpose, to be Ma'ached Am Yisrael, to unite us as a people, to bring us all together, and to show that all the Torah comes from the same source, and that it's all one Torah. And I want to come back to talk about the limit of understanding. So the limit of understanding. In Nefesh HaChaim, in Shar Gimel, Rav Chaim Volozhin introduces us to a concept called makom. Let's make it very clear. Makom, which we will translate as place, makom equals tzimtzum. It says so, the Theology. It says so specifically in Nefesh HaChaim. And he brings a source from the Torah. What's the source for tzimtzum in the Torah? Moshe Rabbeinu was pleading with the Rebbeinu Shalom, was pleading with God after Am Yisrael had sinned with the golden calf. And he achieves forgiveness for us. While he's talking to God, he thinks, okay, I've got a moment of grace. I'm going to pop the question. So what does he say? He says to the Rebbeinu Shalom, he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, Hareini na es kvodecha. Show me your honor, which in modern parlance would be, I don't see you. I want to get a glimpse. Please show me yourself. Bear in mind who we're talking about here. We're talking about Lokam Navi Kamosha. We're talking about the single individual since Adam HaRishon, the only individual in the entirety of the Jewish people who had the highest level of perception of God ever. And he didn't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu anyway. HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers him and he says, no can do. Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. You can't see me while you are physically alive. That was the end of it. You thought that would be the end of it. But then God says something else. He says, Hine makom iti. Behold, makom, the place, iti is with me. What does that mean? We'll come back to that soon. The limit of understanding. Okay, what is the limit of understanding? Hebrew is an amazing language. Amazing language. Words which are similar in Hebrew have got similar meaning. And the word for understanding in Hebrew is bina. And inside the word bina, we have another word. Bein. Bina, understanding, between. What have the two got to do with each other? Chazal explained that Bina is lahavin dava mitoch dava. What does that mean? Understand something from something else. It doesn't tell me what understanding is, or does it? The Gemara in Brachos talks about Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes Saginara Haber. Saginara means blind. But what do the words Saginara actually mean? Sorry? Sagi is much and Nahar is light. Much light. And it's normally understood to be almost like a sarcastic expression, which means the opposite of what we're trying to say. In fact, it's very topical at the moment. The Rav from Bartanura says Or means light, but it's referring to night time. And therefore, Rav Bartanura says Baloshan Saginara. Doesn't really mean that. If we actually think about it carefully, Saginara means much light. If I were to hold the most powerful halogen light, 1 million candle light, holding it above my head, it's white, and you are looking at me, what do you see? Nothing? You see light, you see white light. Can you see me? Why? Too bright, and therefore what? You're blind. What does it mean to be blind? You're seeing white light. In order to interpret what you see, in order to understand what you see, you need to see the difference in colours between my face, my shirt, my pants. If you don't see the difference in the colours between all of these things, you cannot see anything. You cannot interpret what you're looking at. Understanding comes from differentiation, comes from separation, comes from a difference between things. If there is no difference between things, we cannot understand. We cannot understand what we see. We cannot feel. We cannot interpret what we hear. We cannot interpret what we smell, or if we're smelling something. All our senses, our entire interaction with the world around us, depends on difference and differentiation in order to be able to understand what we are interacting with. If we have no difference, we cannot understand. Let's take this a step further. If I want to convey an idea to you, there is a chair over there. I just used the word chair. If we really think about it, a chair is a loaded statement. Chair is implicitly saying chair, and not table, and not wall, and not so window, and not you. As long as you have the same relative framework of understanding that a chair is not a table or a wall or you, then you will understand what I'm talking about when I refer to a chair. See, even words are expressing differentiation, are expressing difference. When I talk to you about a colour, I talk about the colour red. How do you know what I'm talking about when I say red? Because you have the same experience as me. You have the same framework of reference, like red as opposed to blue, as opposed to green, as opposed to brown. As long as you have the same relative reference, we can talk colours. It doesn't matter if you actually perceive the same thing as me when I see red, and maybe what you see as red is something else. As long as the relative difference between the colours is the same, you are going to understand what I'm talking about. So in order to understand something, we need to have difference. Bina is Beit. Lahavin dava and lahavchin dava mitov dava. There is one thing in our experience which we all experience, but there is no differentiation in that one thing. Any guesses? It's under our noses. Air, be more general. Sorry? Space. Let's be more general than that. Space-time. I cannot imagine space without time or time without space. We're going to follow Einstein. We're going to talk about space-time. I cannot imagine a brick wall at the end of the universe because what's on the other side of that brick wall? I cannot imagine anything outside of space-time. And I will accuse you of the same. There is no scientist in the world who can define what space-time is, for a very simple reason. There is nothing else in terms of to define it. There is no being, there's no differentiation. If every single experience of ours is within space-time, I've got no alternative experience to define it with. Chazal use makom to refer to God. And makom is space-time. Chazal use makom to refer to God in a number of places. It is the analogy that they use to refer to God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hu makodesh ha'olam ve'ein ha'olam makomo, says the gracious Rabbah. Baruch ha'makom Baruch Hu. That's a Mishnah from Midos, which we're going to quote in 2 weeks' time at the opening of the story, the paragraph of the Arba Banim. If we've got to go and pay a Shiva visit, we refer to Makom Yenachem. Makom is space-time. There is one aspect, when we're looking at Makom, there is one aspect, when we're referring to God as Makom, there's one aspect which is relevant compared to God in Makom, and that aspect is the fact that everything is Makom. And that is the nearest we can come, and Chazal use this analogy specifically because this is the nearest human beings can come to understand what God is. God is continuous amongst our entire experience. There is no place devoid of God, and therefore we cannot understand God. While I am in this physical existence, and I can only interact with my world around me and understand things through differentiation and difference, I cannot understand God. But nevertheless, I can appreciate that He can be everywhere. Rav Chaim Volozhin uses some specific terminology. He refers to God's perspective, mitzido, and our perspective of the world, which is mitzidenu. God's perspective and our perspective. God's perspective of the world is unchanged as a result of His creation of it. From our perspective, we do not see God. And the point that Rav Chaim Volozhin comes along and explains is that both of those perspectives are simultaneous. They are both true. Just to give alternative language for mitzido, mitzidenu, Rav Chaim Volozhin uses some Kabbalistic language. Yichuda Elah is mitzido, Yichuda Tata is mitzidenu. Alternatively, Oros and Kalim. Oros is mitzido, Kalim is mitzidenu. Alternatively, mitzidenu, our perspective, is the same as Yichuda Tata, it's the same as Kalim, it's also the same as Malchus. I'm not going to explain that now. Nefesh HaChaim should explain that statement. Those are alternative expressions if anyone is familiar with it. So, and another alternative expression is mitzido is immanence, and mitzidenu is transcendence. From our point of view, God transcends the world. From God's point of view, He is immanent, and the two happen simultaneously. And those people who thought that there was a machlokas, that there was an argument between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, they thought that the Vilna Gaon talked about transcendence of God, and they thought the Hasidim was talking about immanence. Anyone who talks about a difference between immanence and transcendence missed the point about Tzimtzum. They don't understand what Tzimtzum is. Tzimtzum is a combination of the two together, of immanence and transcendence. How are we meant to understand that? What is this? Not a trick question. What is this? Piece of paper. What else is it?
Rectangle.
Pardon?
Rectangle.
Rectangle. Would you agree with me that it has paper molecules inside it?
Cellulose.
Cellulose, maybe? Would you agree that cellulose is made of atoms? Would you also agree that atoms are made out of subatomic particles? Protons, neutrons? Okay, what are protons and neutrons made out of? Quarks. What are quarks made out of? Strings, according to the latest scientific theory. Multi-dimensional manifolds folded over each other. And strings are some form of underlying energy that no scientist in the world has got a clue what it is. Manhu. What would we say it is eventually? Pardon? We might say it's God eventually. But the point is, what is this piece of paper? Is it a piece of paper? Is it a bunch of molecules? Is it atoms? Is it subatomic particles? Is it quarks? Is it strings? What is it?
It's a manifestation of God.
All of the above, it just depends on how you look at it. It depends on your perspective. If I had an electron microscope goggles on, I would see this as atoms. I would see the shadows of the atoms. If I had string goggles on, I would see this as strings. And if I had God goggles on, I would see this as the Ribono Shel Olam. It's just a question of perspective. And this idea of mitzido, mitzidenu flows through all the levels I was just talking about. In Kabbalistic terminology, we could even perhaps get away with saying that atoms and quarks and subatomic particles and strings are all different world levels. It's all the same place. All of these worlds that we talk about in Kabbalistic literature, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, it's all the same place. Gan Eden, Gehinnom, it's here. Rav Chaim Nikraim Mason B'chayehem, because they're in Gehinnom now, they just don't see it. We're all in the same place. Makom is the analogy for God. And that really is what HaTzimtzum is all about. Now, this idea of Mitzido, Mitzidenu, Rav Chaim Volozhin attaches names to Mitzido, Mitzidenu. With this idea, we can understand the Torah, we can understand Tefillah, we can understand davening. And the names that he attaches to these ideas, Mitzido, Mitzidenu. Mitzido is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Mitzidenu is Elokim. So the way God is manifest in this world is Elokim. Mitzidenu, from our perspective. We don't see Yud Kei Vav Kei. So we can understand the Torah using this idea. So let's start at the very beginning. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. What does that mean? In the beginning, we translate it normally as God created the heavens and the earth. Wrong. In the beginning, well, there's a Gemara in Megillah, Talmai HaMelech, King Ptolemy, that's how you pronounce it, wanted to translate the Torah. And he took 72 Chachomim, and he put them into 72 different compartments or places, and he said, go translate. Can you imagine 72 sages agreeing on anything? A miracle happened! And there were 12 places in the Torah where they changed the translation because they thought the people would come to err as a result of it. And the first place in the Torah that they did this with was Bereshis bara Elokim. They switched it around. Elokim bara Bereshis. So they understood Bereshis bara Elokim to mean, in the beginning, He created Elokim, God. Sounds bizarre. It's not bizarre at all. If Elokim is the way in which God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is manifest in nature, the way in which God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the God that we do not see, is manifest in nature, then it makes perfect sense. Elokim is Gematria HaTeva, it says so twice in Pardas Rimonim. HaTeva 86, Elokim is 86. In the beginning, He, God, created the way in which He is manifest in nature. What's that? Es hashamayim es haaretz. Simple chat. Let's take it further. In connection with Pesach, we're talking about simple chat of Psukim. The beginning of Parashas Va'era. Moshe Rabbeinu had come back to Egypt, and he is now tasked. He's in Egypt. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to him, and he's now giving him a task. And the plagues are about to happen. Parashas Va'era, first pasuk in Parashas Va'era. Vaydaber Elokim el Moshe, vayomer elav ani Yud Kei Vav Kei. What does that mean? Elokim, the God who is manifest in this world, was speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he's announcing himself to Moshe and telling him, really, Ani Yud Kei Vav Kei, I permeate through everything, I am everywhere. That's what he was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu. By the way, he only introduced himself twice to two other people in the Torah in this way. One was Avram Avinu, the Bris Bein Abisari, and the other was Yaakov, the Sulam Yaakov. And they didn't get it. They didn't relate to God being everywhere. Moshe Rabbeinu did. I'll read on, it's possible. Va'era el Avraham el Yitzchak Yaakov b'keil shakai. I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in the form of keil shakai. What's keil shakai? Gemara in Chagiga says, keil she'omer la'olam dai. What's dai? Dai, enough. A boundary. When you have a boundary, you say, something's happening up to here, and then there's difference between here and there. There's differentiation. So Kel Shakai is another form of Elokim, difference of this world. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov only related to this world at the end of the day. Even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu seemingly tried to communicate this concept to them. And the pasuk continues, "Vayera Avram alitzad ve'Yaakov b'kil shakai, u'shmi yukevavke lo daiti lahem." I didn't make my name yukevavke known to them. And then a couple of psukim later, Moshe Rabbeinu gets charged with his mission. Lachen emor livnei Yisrael ani yukevavke. Your mission. What's Pesach about? Pesach is about Moshe Rabbeinu communicating, Ani Yudke Vavke, I am everywhere with the Jewish people. And it continues with the four Lashonos of Geula, the four expressions of redemption, V'hitzesi, V'hitzalti, V'ga'alti, V'lakachti, and then has it finished, V'yidaitem, you shall know, tell Bnei Yisrael that you shall know as a result of coming out of Egypt, that Ki Ani Yudke Vavke Elokechem, that I am Yukevavke, I am everywhere. This is what the Geulas Mitzrayim is all about. Mitzrayim is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim are our boundaries. We have to come out of our boundaries in order to relate to God, and have a proper understanding that God is everywhere about us. And how does that section finish? Vaydaber Moshe Keino b'nei Yisrael v'lo shama'u el Moshe v'kotzer ruach me'avodah kasha. Am Yisrael at the time, Moshe Rabbeinu tried to communicate this with Am Yisrael, they didn't get it. They just didn't get it. It took a while. And if we go forwards to Parashas Bo, we see in the beginning of Parashas Bo, right at the beginning, that Vayoma Yukevavke el Moshe, that the all-permeating God is talking to Moshe. He says, Bo el Paro ki ani ichbadati es libo es levav adav. Come to Paro, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servant. Leman, there's two Leman, two reasons why. Leman shesio seisaila b'kirbo, in order to place my signs within him, the makos. Leman, and this is the important Leman for us tonight. Leman tesaper ba'ozni bincha ben bincha, in order to tell future generations. It's amazing, this pasuk does not feature in the Haggadah anywhere. ולמען תספר באוזני בנך ובן בנך אשר הסללתי במצרים ועשי אשר שמתי בם וידעתם כי אני יוקבבקה. So the whole purpose of telling the future generations is vidaitem, that they should know ki ani yukevavke. You come out of your Mitzrayim, you come out of your gevulos, you come out of your boundaries, and we have to every year on year, we haven't achieved the full geula yet. Geulas Mitzrayim was only partial. We will only achieve the full geula in the future for Mashiach. We're coming out of Egypt every year, every Seder night. What's Pesach about? It's about recognizing, acknowledging, relating to, being aware of God being everywhere. And every year we have to try and gain a deeper understanding of that. So that's how we can understand the simple pshat in the Torah. Now, I look at my clock and I see I've hit time. I've got a lot more to tell you, and it's entirely up to you. I leave it up to you.
Keep going.
If you want to keep, and if anyone needs to leave, I fully understand. There is a Mariv upstairs in 9:30. But okay, I'll keep going as long as you want me to. Okay, so we need this idea in order to understand the Torah. But not only that. We need this idea in order to understand tefillah. We cannot understand tefillah without this idea. Let's take a couple of simple examples. Shema Yisrael, Yukei Vavkei, Elokeinu, Yukei Vavkei, Echad. Perhaps the most important line. It's the only, we have a mitzvah d'oraisa to say this pasuk morning and night. Should be the last thing on our lips before we fall asleep, before God, at the end of a fulfilled life, before we pass away, as we learn from Rabbi Akiva, Yatzasa Vishmasa Ve'echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What are we talking about? This is the idea. Yukei Vavkei equals Elokim. The God that we don't see really is the God that we do see. And this is the idea that we have to have on our mind at all times. We get to the end of Yom Kippur after 40 days of tshuva, starting from the beginning of Elul. We get to the end of the Zenith, and what do we say? Hashem Hu Elokim. 7 times. What are we talking about? We're talking about the concept of Tzimtzum. Hashem, Yokevavke Hu Elokim. Kedusha. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Yokevavke Tzivakos. Melo Chol Haaretz Kavodo. What does that mean? God fills everything. He's everywhere. In contrast to that, next line. Baruch Kavod Yokevavke Min Komo. Blessed is the honor of God from His place. His place meaning transcendence. He's not here. I don't relate to Him. The idea of Tzimtzum permeates through all of Tefillah. I can go on and on. It's all recorded in Nefesh HaChaim. But it really does underpin the entirety of our Tefillah. We cannot understand any of our prayers without this basic idea of Tzimtzum. In fact, this idea really underpins the entirety of Jewish history. Mankind's history. And I want to finish off, hopefully in just a few minutes, I want to finish off by presenting the Vilna Gaon's messianic view. And all of this is recorded in Nefesh HaTzimtzum in detail, and this is my perspective, my take on it. All the sources are in Nefesh HaTzimtzum. So in the beginning, God, here's a tin pot history, Kabbalistic history of the world. In the beginning, God created Adam, and Adam sinned. Adam was a creation on a very, very high level. He was able to relate to Yud-Kei Vav-Kei directly. And the result of his sin, he brought travesty to the world. And Kabbalistically, you could argue, maybe he didn't actually sin. He was meant to sin. But he brought travesty to the world. He brought death to the world. And ever since then, the entire history of mankind has been doing or trying to rectify the effects and the impact of Adam's sin, doing tikkun. And ultimately, when we get to the time of Moshiach, we will again be able to relate to Yud-Kei Vav-Kei everywhere. And the Jewish people have taken the banner to be Kohanim amongst Mamleches Kohanim amongst the nations in order to take this task forward until we get to Mashiach. Let me tell you about a fascinating Zohar. In the Zohar talks about, there's a Zohar which talks about the 7,000 years from the creation of man, of Adam, and relates each of those 1,000 years to a day of the week. 7,000 years, each day relates and maps to a day of the week. Currently, we are in the middle of Friday. And ever since 1840, it works out, we're going towards Shabbos. What happens as we get towards Shabbos? Things speed up. Things speed up, and the Zohar talks about the opening of two arubos hachochma, two well springs of knowledge, one an upper one and one a lower one. Zeh l'umat zeh, they're corresponding to each other. The upper wellspring of knowledge is the knowledge, the deeper knowledge of the Torah, the Kabbalah. And the lower knowledge of the Torah, or the lower form of knowledge, is the knowledge of the natural sciences. Zeh l'umat zeh. There is a correspondence between the two. And not only that, it says that when we get to just before Mashiach, the Zohar says that even little children will understand these deep Kabbalistic concepts. There seems to be a connection between knowledge of Kabbalah and science. We need science in order to explain the knowledge of Kabbalah. And so much so that even little children can do so. I'll give you a little example. There's a basic principle in Kabbalah that the part contains the whole, and the whole contains all the parts. So if the part contains the whole, what does that mean? A little child can tell us this today. A little child will look at a human being. He knows that the human being is made of cells. Each cell is made of DNA, has got DNA inside it. The DNA codes for the entire whole. Every part contains the whole. 200 years ago, no one could have understood this idea unless they had Ruach HaKodesh. Today, it's a simple idea. Anybody can understand it. And that, by the way, answers a basic question which I didn't ask earlier. Why was the Masorah of the Kabbalah through a single line? Why didn't it get given over to all of Am Yisrael in one go? Very simply, because Am Yisrael the world would not have understood the Kabbalah. And it took unique individuals through the ages who didn't have what we have today, didn't have the insight of scientific knowledge in order to understand the Kabbalistic ideas. And those unique individuals, they had some form of Ruach HaKodesh, they had some sort of way of relating to it and understanding it. But your average individual could not have possibly related to it. But today, we are beginning to have the tools to be able to relate to these Kabbalistic ideas. The Vilna Gaon himself is recorded to have said, as much as we lack scientific knowledge, we will lack 100-fold in our knowledge of Torah. And he's referring to these times now. In order to understand the Torah properly, we have to understand science, but it's much deeper than that. The Zohar explains, HaKadosh Baruch Hu istakal ba'oraisa uvara olma. God looked into the Torah and he created the world. What does that mean? It means that the world comes from the Torah. But the world operates according to the natural sciences. Therefore, the natural sciences come from the Torah. It's part of the Torah. Zen umat zen. Which part of the Torah is it? It's the part which fell when Adam sinned. Adam sinned, the nobelos hachochma, parts of the Torah fell and was swallowed up by the nations. And what is the job of Am Yisrael? To do tikkun, to rectify this. Let me tell you what's going on in the world. 100 years ago, if you would have stood here, you wouldn't have believed in 100 years' time we would see all the built-up area around us and 45% of Am Yisrael living in Israel. You wouldn't have believed it. There's something else going on here. If you were to take 100 years ago, if I were to ask you, what would the top 10 billionaires 100 years ago have owned? What would you say?
Real estate.
Real estate, maybe slaves, commodities, physical things. 100 years later, what do the top 10 billionaires of the world own?
Chips.
Some of them own the physical things. About 50% of them own data, intellectual property, technology, information. The world has fundamentally changed. Fundamentally changed. There's been a tectonic shift in the nature of the world. The world values different things today. And it's only happened in the last 100 years. It's an incredible thing. Would you have believed that the Jewish people would be at the forefront of this technological revolution? It's called the digital transformation. It's happening now. It's like the new industrial revolution. Would anyone have believed 100 years ago that not only were we to be living in Am Yisrael to be living in Eretz Yisrael, but we in Eretz Yisrael would be at the forefront of the technical revolution? do you think we're involved in? We're rectifying the Torah. At this point in time, it's the Mashiach is coming. Ani rochev al chamor. It's under our noses. We don't smell it. We don't know it's happening. Ani rochev al chamor. It's happening behind the scenes. Those people who are involved in establishing the state of Israel, most of them would have been religiously unaffiliated, perhaps even disconnected from the idea of bringing Mashiach, but they were involved in bringing Mashiach. And Jews, most of the Jews who are involved in the technological revolution in Israel are also religiously unaffiliated, and they don't realize what they're involved in. They're involved in part of the process that's happening behind the scenes of rectifying Adam's sin. At some point, there will be some form of connection, says the Vilna Gaon, between the Kabbalah and the knowledge of science, the natural sciences and technology. And the Vilna Gaon explains in Parshas Va'ischanan, we have in Psukim, that Moshe Rabbeinu is describing Torah mitzvahs, and mitzvahs in particular. And he says, Ki hi chochmaschem uvinaschem le'enei ha'amim. That the Torah, that the mitzvahs, non-Jews, the nations will look at us and they'll say, wow, that's wisdom, that's understanding. They'll look at us and they'll say that. Am chacham v'navon, says the pasuk there. They'll look at us and they say, we are a wise and understanding nation. I want to ask you, who today is looking at the world and saying that the Jewish people are a wise and understanding nation because they have these mitzvahs? There may be some people in South Korea who are saying that. There may be some Southern Baptists who are saying that. But what are they saying today? When we send up the Patriot missiles and we show our prowess in technology, they are saying Am Chacham V'Navon. And the Vilna Gaon is saying that the world is recognizing us through our prowess in science. And he charges us with a mission. And he says we have to, in this day and age, get involved, deepen our understanding of Kabbalah, deepen our understanding of the natural sciences, use the knowledge of sciences in order to understand Kabbalah. And as the Zohar says, with the knowledge of Kabbalah, we will exit the exile with Rachamim. Nefesh HaChaim is a book, it's a remarkable book. Irrespective of the historical context which caused it to show all of its sources in Kabbalah, the fact of the matter is, it is a remarkable portal, structured portal into the unstructured world of Kabbalah. Please God, may we merit to learn Nefesh HaChaim, and I hope the Nefesh HaTzimtzum will enable us to learn Nefesh HaChaim more deeply and understand and be more aware of the presence of Yud Kei Vav Kei in the world. Kimala Yud Kei Vav, Kimala Haaretz Dea es Yud Kei Vav Kei Kamayim Layam Machasim. And we should have the most tremendous awareness of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the all-permeating God in the world. Amen. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here. If you're interested in buying the Sfarim, they are at the back on discount. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to stand here as long as anyone wants to ask me questions and try and give you answers. And if anyone needs to go, I know we've gone way over time. If anyone needs to go, I fully understand, and please feel free to do so. Question?
Thank you very much. That was a lot of work. Are you giving any shiurim or ongoing classes or continuation of this?
I don't know yet. Please God, I'll have the opportunity to do so in the future. At this point in time, I have nothing planned.
Could you tell us a little bit how this project affected your life?
It'll go up by itself.
How did this project affect my life?
You as a person.
Pardon?
You as a person.
How does it affect me as a person? I can only say it's given me a deeper awareness of what the Ribbono Shel Olam is. This is, as I was explaining earlier, it really has been an ongoing struggle for me since my teenage. So I may not have always noticed it, but I'm actually a person who lives in two worlds. I'm working in the real world, and I've discovered this world. And for me, perhaps the biggest struggle is to be able to marry the two worlds together. And I can only presume that Ribbono Shel Olam has put me in this position specifically in order to try and grapple with it.
The mechanics of the 5 years, as you were getting deeper and deeper into it, of course, and trying to think of this in day-to-day living, was it a certain amount of hours? I mean, you have got life outside of these sports. Did you set aside a time, or did it just happen because you needed it?
So how did I actually do it? How did I write the book? I tried to devote every spare minute I could in order to write the sefer. I realized that in order to write the sefer, you have to be possessed to write the sefer. And the person I should really refer you to answer this question is my wife, because she's been the main casualty of this exercise. There's no way a sefer can be written without being absolutely possessed.
I mean, you didn't really set a time.
I set all times that I had available, and without being kovea itim, it would not have happened. I worked full time, and I had to find the time in order to fit this in. And it was the other way around. My work became a period where I would think, I would do my work properly, but I would still think in the back of my mind about what I was writing, and then that gave me the space, the breathing space in between actual bouts of writing in order to consolidate my thoughts.
And look what Hashem did, that brain utilize. Thank you.
I just want to say, for Yaakov, I've been learning this now for 3 months in Kabbalah, your book. I want to just advise people this is not a book to pick up lightly. It's not going to be something you're going to sit down and read casually. Read it in depth. Take Rabbi Haber's share. Listen to learn it in depth, because it's amazing. So Yaakov.
Thank you very much.
Being a scientist, I really resonated with it at the end. Do you have any guidance on where to look? In my simple experience in seeing what's out there for the public, when they talk about science, it's actually been very painful. There's been some wonderful concepts that are flooring, and they're next to concepts, scientific, called science, which is, from my perspective, real painful. It's trash. Like they're putting concepts, and I get really hurts when I hear lectures where they talk about science, and they're not educated, and I don't know where to go to like what you're saying, the science and relating to Kabbalah, because there is tremendous connection. I've seen a tremendous connection, and then I see the same safer stuff that's, it blows my mind, like there was no editor looking at the book, and it really hurts me as a scientist to see this, because I want to connect.
I want to give you a challenge. The truth is, the connection between science and Kabbalah is only beginning to happen now. It's beginning to be understood. And little by little, and we need people, we need you, with your scientific experience, to look at Kabbalah and to learn Kabbalah, and to try and marry the two together. And over time, it's inevitable, according to the law of God, it's inevitable that we will have the quantum leap which will connect the two together in a way which science will accept. But it takes people with scientific background in order to engage with Kabbalistic principles to do so. So please take up this challenge.